Hi, madam. Welcome to our show, madam.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you for inviting me for this show.
Uh, Ma'am, I think, there's a technical glitch which went on to put me on mute. That's what I see. So we are talking on the topic of threat intelligence, right? So, and with this, we will start diving into the topic. What is threat intelligence, or how AI is integrated into threat intelligence systems, and how can leaders avoid making mistakes when it comes to integrating AI?
Sure. So let's start understanding what is all threat about. So cybersecurity, if you see, um, is totally defined by number of threats, right? So you have like day in, day out threats that is coming in from endpoints, from the number of endpoints is increasing, and the threats that is coming from each of them is increasing day by day. Manually it is impossible to handle all of them, because look at the number of devices. You have like millions and probably billions of devices across the globe, right? Given the number of devices, the number of endpoints that is there on the internet, and each generating messages almost like per second, the number of information that you are having and identifying what are the kind of threats, isolating threats from the actual messages is going to be very important. So this, if you look at the scale, right, it goes to billion and trillions, right? Now threat intelligence is really about identifying which of them actually is going to impact the security of an enterprise or of an organization, of a group of, say, SMB, right? So threat intelligence is primarily, if I have to call it out, it's about identifying the threats from multiple feeds coming across various endpoints, right, on the network. Now, network is going on increasing, the endpoints are going on increasing, and per second, the data is going on increasing. Manually, it is very difficult. So you have, multiple. So the only way to do it is automate, right, and automate with intelligence. Now, if you look at like threat intelligence, traditionally, threat intelligence has been big on both ML, AI and ML model, right? Reason behind is primarily the amount of data. No human can go and process so much of a data on a minute by minute basis, right? And that's why it becomes very imperative for threat intelligence to rely on AI and ML models. Now, having said that, there's not a single model that is going to be effective. So you have to use conjunction of multiple models, right? Now, that's about the threat intelligence. Now if you look at like cyber leaders, right, like cybersecurity leaders like me, just going and figuring out threat intelligence is not possible without understanding what AI can do and what ML can do, right? Manually, so I have a team which does manual analysis also, right, on the live data that is coming, but you can do only so much. We can do only so much, right? And even though we have 24/7 covered by a team of professionals, analysts, there's only so much that we can do. So what we try to do is automate a lot of things using ML models, using AI, and then we ratify it with human context and gesture, and then come back. So I think for cyber leaders, cybersecurity leaders, I would say it's a must. It's a given must that you cannot do without AI. In fact, like before Gen AI and AI became uh, the buzzword, AI was already there with the threat intelligence, right? Threat intelligence cannot be done without AI. So I would say for any cybersecurity leader, it is very, very important that they understand how they can, create that efficacy, because intelligence is all about having a good efficacy, right? And the efficacy is only how best your models are, how AI is giving you the best efficacy. I think that's the whole paradigm. So cybersecurity leaders must, I would say that there is no way about not knowing about AI ML, but so how do you keep with the changing speed of innovation that is happening in that space and keeping up with it.
You rightly said, because now AI and ML is coming into every aspect that we look at, right? So intelligence is one thing that we have to, and I think what you said as a pointer also is very important, saying that threat intelligence cannot live without AI, because there's a lot of analysis that needs to be looked at and see how this can be
Oh,
predicted.
yes.
Yeah. So if that is what we are looking at, growing or integrating AI to our this one, can we share a real time example where AI revealed uh, threats faster than the humans, and how we could look at from a leadership perspective on how did we accept it or reacted on it?
Sure. Sure. So look at it like, the number of fees that I was talking about, right? It's probably runs in trillions, right? Now there is a pattern to this, right? So what we do with the ML models and with AI on top of it is to recognize these patterns. And I'm talking in very layman words so that everyone can understand the patterns, and probably like, say you've got like per second or per minute, you are getting a million feed, right? Looking at the pattern on that million field, and you basically train the model saying that, okay, if these are the pattern, this is what the feed would be, right? Now that taking that 100 million feeds and saying that within a couple of minutes that, yeah, this is not false positive, this is false negative, is only done through AI/ML model. Whereas when you have a context, right, so this whole thing also gets fed to a person who is looking at, right? So false positive and false negative that become later on, like, which is common pattern, we AI/ML does it much faster than what traditional human being would. Having said that, threat intelligence is evolving every day. So you look at it 365 into so many days, right? Every per year, you've got so many feeds coming in, but then there is a new feed also, right? And I think the new feed is where you need the human context, right? So when there's no pattern found, there's no relation found, that is the time when it gets flagged to a human person saying that, something is wrong about this feed and I'm not able to classify it, right? So if you look at like files or the URLs, everything has a pattern of classification, right? So we categorize it, we classify it, and we say, but if we don't get the classification, it actually goes into a human, saying that, okay, human, can you? So the person, the analyst comes into picture, looks at it, says, okay, fine. Now what is this? And then, right. So more or less, I would say like, the bulk of the work is done through the AI/ML model, because that's trained to understand patterns, to understand some of the relations between messages coming out. So all those kind of thing you can actually, which is known, right? Which is known can be done by these, right? AI/ML model, and which is known, unknown, or known but not very clear about it. Those are the things which actually require some human context, and in terms of looking deep diving as to whether it is a threat, whether it's just another message, or so yes. So I would say like, in more or less, I would say 50% it's an automated thing, because AI/ML does most of the things, and not the threats is not there on all the 7 trillion or 8 trillion of messages that is coming, right?
Yeah.
So AI/ML actually kind of like boils it down to very few, and then which, based on your models, different models which decide, then it will filter it again to few which has got actual new ones, right? Those needs to be categorized. So I would say more or less a lot gets categorized by these models.
Okay. Now, when we say categorization, and we are looking at faster pace of having threats detected, how do we look at balancing AI driven threat intelligence model with bringing some of the human element or intuition on making judgments, right, in cybersecurity
Yeah.
leadership roles? Because again, when we talk about AI can give you patterns, the judgment or the final call has to be taken by humans, right? So how
Yes.
is that mix going to be looking forward with enhancement day by day going on? So how do
Right.
we look at the leadership roles on these balancement?
So there are two things on this frame. And if you look at any ML model, right, there is a data part
Hmm.
of it, which you feed and say, okay, this is the data on which you, and then there's an algorithm part which you actually train, that if you get these kind of things, do this, right? So it's basically the engine part of it, right? Now, both the data and the training engine both needs to be upgraded and updated on a regular basis, right? And that is where I think the human context comes very uh, meaningful, because that relation, right, can be done by, you do have self-learning ML models that they say, right, you get data, new data, it learns and then it does. But then I think in threat intelligence, some of it really needs to be ratified by human, and that's why it's very important that the ML model and the data that we are getting on a regular basis gets sanitized and redone. Okay, so you remember I just mentioned that not single model will not suffice, right, with all the uh, so what we do is look at all. So you update the category, you update the classification, right? A new thing comes in, you go update, right? Now the data which is coming new, maybe it's not the engine that you've built up, it doesn't know the new thing, and that's where you need again the human connect, right? So some data scientist needs to come in and say, okay, oh, I'm seeing a new pattern, I'm seeing a new data stuff, what do we do with it, right? And then the human context comes in terms of, okay, this is where it needs to streamline. And for all you know, for the data scientist, it's a new data, so he or she needs to ratify what kind of a data it is, where is it coming from, what impact does it have, and based on that, train the model again, right? So it's not just one time done deal, it's a very iterative process. And we need to make sure that every time we do it, it's being, and I'm telling you, like, I just talked about fees, right? But look at, like, phishing, right? Like, it's a massive thing right now, right? And it occurs on multiple areas, your email, right? The feeds coming in is humongous. So until unless, I think the human context is very, very important. While you can set and train and get the things to take care of maximum workload, there is still stuff where you really need the data scientist, the human person, to come in and say, okay, what is it, right? Yeah. So I think human is very important. We can, while the bulk of the efficacy and efficiency is got through AI ML models, um, human is very important in terms of setting the tone, charting the path, right?
Yeah, got it, madam. Now, with that, see, again, we are talking about roles where we look at, in your experience, how AI has changed the role for an empathetic and emotional intelligence in landing into leading, I'm saying, not landing, leading cybersecurity teams. You mentioned few pointers earlier in this question, but what I see is there is always a intelligence factor and an empathy factor which comes in taking decisions. So how do we look at that pointer from your experience or the teams that you handled? Any pointers on that?
Right. Right. So till now, what we talked about, Prem, was how do we leverage AI for speed and scale, right? For analysis. And whereas human is there for the judgment, for the context, right? And so these are the two things that we talk. But if you look at, like, in terms of human intuition, in terms of ethical consideration, in terms of complex threat assessments, right, it becomes very, very important that the empath- empathetic part of leaders comes out. I'll give you a very small example, right? um, Last week I've been hearing a lot of threats in terms of WhatsApp getting hacked, right? And while the rectification happens within an hour or so, but just the very impact that your WhatsApp has been hacked can cause a lot of mental stress, right? Now look at it like, someone who is like detecting this and doing, right? When you give it to AI model or ML, they just look at it saying that, okay, this is coming from a different IP, this is, and not the same number and the IP and not the same phone number, figure it out. But look at the impact that it has on the human being, right? So specifically, all the leadership roles, I would say, getting the empathy portion, or whatever we call it as emotional intelligence part of human being, fed into some of these is very, very important, right? And the second thing, I would say, is cybersecurity is an area where things are happening day in, day out. New things are coming. As leaders, as I would go with line managers, right, and senior leaders. How do you make sure that each and everyone understands the rapidness or the agility needed, right, to move things around, bring in human context in each and every conversation, have that collaborative approach. I'll give you, like, while we're talking about threat intelligence, it looks very simple, but look at multiple workloads that goes across, right? There are different teams working across. Um, just making sure that all the teams understand the criticality and the speed at which it is happening requires a very different shift from a leadership perspective, right? Um, the second thing I would say, this apart from speed and is open mindedness, right? So things come over here in a very different form and fashion. If you have a very close leadership, it becomes very, very difficult. Now the person as is, right, based on the data, it's a very data intense domain. So look at data, put your human touch, and then make sure that you connect that dots. Is becomes very, very important in threat intelligence, cybersecurity area, vis-a-vis any other area, I would say. Um, right. So even the collaboration, right? Like, false positive. It's very easy to say, in technical, false positive, false negative, right? But the impact it has on, look at it like a good email, right, is marked as,
False positive.
spam,
Spam. Yeah.
and you miss out on the information, right? Whereas if a spam is marked as normal, I'm just trying to relate to the day-to-day stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's such of a havoc,
Hmm.
and it plays with sentiment of human, right? We all are human being, we all are social being. We want to be make sure that everything happens rightly, right? The whole goal of threat intelligence is to minimize this occurrence, right? And if the leaders in the organization are not very sensitive about this, it becomes an issue, right? So I would say from that perspective, all the leaders, whether they are on the development side or the compliance side, needs to be very, very respectful, and I think they should be aware about how does it impact, right? So I think that is one different thing, which I've seen in cybersecurity. Very, very important about empathy. The third thing I think is in cybersecurity is, you would have probably heard about it, is frameworks and governance. You can go rampant with it, right? You can go rampant. So until unless you come back with, like, okay, this is the framework that I want to operate in, right, and these are my, border conditions, and also put a governance around it, people
Hmm.
can go in every direction,
Yeah.
including leaders, right?
Yes.
uh, so I think I would say that is the third most important thing, from a leadership perspective.
Okay. So a framework is very, very important, and looking at how do we have that deployed across
Yes,
and have that monitored is what you are saying would be the most important and critical element of cybersecurity
yes.
threat intelligence. Point taken, madam. What should be the what? Give me a second. What key metrics should or what is the sign CEOs and business owners should watch if there is a threat intelligence is truly effective, or it's just saying that is flashy stuff that we are looking at?
All right.
Is there a
So
metric that we look at?
So there is a lot of metrics that we look at.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can tell you, like, depending upon different roles
Hmm.
whom we are looking for, like CEO looks at a very, very different metric, whereas leaders look at
Yeah.
very different. And I think um, the developers and the people, the analysts look at a very different metric. And it could be, pretty different at each level, because I think it's a purpose, right? Um, a lot of CEO, I would say today, especially after the Gen AI, right, is like, okay, the only way you can succeed is use Gen AI, right? And use AI and Gen AI. And it's a very fancy thing to use, like, okay, I have used AI, so I'm much better than the my competitor, right? I think that's the whole thing. Having said that, I would say the single most metric that would really matter for threat intelligence is the efficacy and the accuracy, right? The efficacy and the accuracy, the reason why I'm saying is how much of the actual threats you're reporting as threats, and the time in which you actually resolve it, right? So the efficacy and accuracy is based on, like, how do you identify. And the second metric I would say is very important is how do we come out of that, right? So you've identified a risk has happened, threat has happened. How do you resolve to a sanitized condition, right? So time to respond and time to recover, right? So I would say that is primarily very, very critical if you see from an engineering leader or from a leadership perspective, right? Having said that, at a CEO level, it would be, how how confident you are about your threat intelligence platform, right? So the CEOs and the senior, CXOs would look at, I have a threat intelligence platform and I can say 99.999, you know, efficacy, right? I mean, look at the case of how it used to be in, hyperscalers, right? 99.995 availability, right? I would want to get to a 9995 kind of an efficacy, right? Is that a possibility? Don't know. But I would say, like, definitely at a CXO's level, they would look at, um, threat intelligence platform efficacy. But I think if you look at it, I think we all know, you get hacked or there's a threat. There is no network which is as secure that you don't have threat. It is about the threat will happen, but how quickly you recover. So I would actually add those two, from a engineering leadership standpoint, because threats will happen. We know how quickly we come back and we make sure no loss has occurred. I think that's very important, right?
Very important
So,
points to be
so four
noted.
things.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Four things. Tell me.
And also the four things: efficiency, efficacy, and accuracy, and then mean time to respond and recover.
Okay.
Right.
So, what we are looking at, having a threat intelligence which is effective, having a right combination of human touch, whereas you keep empathy and the emotional intelligence questions equally important while we do take decisions, right? So, how can this is at the senior leader level, right, where we are looking at
Yeah.
how can the mid-level managers also look at fostering a culture both trust and caution when AI is making real-time decisions that affect security at times, right? So it is very important for us to see how they can also adopt. What is your take on it?
So I think mid-level managers are the folks who make it or break it, right? Because they are the most crucial part in this entire thing. So I would, classify this into a couple of points, right? So first, prioritize AI education and training. And that's what I did, right, in my team as well. While we talk about it, what does AI mean? What does ML mean, right? And there is so many of courses, dearth of courses there, but I think it's about, like, how does it impact cybersecurity, right? So I think first and foremost is education and training, right? Secondly is commitment, right, on AI. Now, if you do traditional any product development vis-a-vis cybersecurity, right? Um, Commitment always matters, whether it is non AI. But I think AI definitely requires more commitment because it requires proactiveness, right, in terms of doing things. Thirdly, with AI, nothing is straightforward, right? So there's a lot of experiments, there's a lot of feasibility studies we do, there's a lot of so I think for mid-level managers, how do we encourage a culture where we can experiment, take risks, right, learn quickly, fail fast, and then come back again, right? So that iterative manner of experimentation. So that's very important because a lot of times we have, okay, it's a set thing, you just go on do it. No, that doesn't work in threat intelligence. Threat intelligence requires experimentation, risk taking, and holding your neck out, right? Third is ethical use of AI. AI can do good things, can do blunders as well, right? And mid managers are at the crux of making sure that ethical AI is in use, right? Um, just training the models, right? Like how do you make sure the biases are removed? It's very easy to say biases are, you should not have biases, but then how do you go and make sure biases are removed, right? So making sure that ethical practices are done, I would say mid-level managers are there. The other things I would say is, okay, all buzz about AI, but then it won't make any traction till it is aligned to the business goals. So I think that's another thing that mid managers need to really push to say that it comes into AI goals, right? And last but not the least, if we have to be successful across organization, a lot of people do a lot of groups, they do different ways of AI, right? How do you collaborate across the organization and adopt different structures for AI? So I'll give you, like, I do the cybersecurity, but then AI is being used in different BUs also. Can I use there some of those concepts into cybersecurity? Yes. Can they use some of the concepts that I use? Yes. So how do we make sure that do so? I think these are very important because in terms of the agility, I think we need to move fast, right? And mid managers are the one who make that agility work. So for them, how do they use their network? How do they use different things available? And a lot of stuff is open source,
Yeah.
right? So how do you use the open source stuff, also making sure that you're not really giving out your IP but still using it, is also something which lies with the mid managers.
Very well pointed out there, madam. Now, as you said, they are the forefront people who bring up the solutions for us to get this implemented. Maybe we put the strategy, we bring everything, and tell them this is how we are trying to bring a model and stuff. But the experiment, the testing, and the integration, as you rightly said, there are different departments who are using. How do we look at what they can look at, and how we can cross leverage our own stuff that we are doing? Now, looking back, for what was one personal leadership lessons that we have or anybody learned when a AI driven system failed to predict or catch a major cybersecurity incident? Because we are going into a hyper automation where we say everything is automated, everything is there. Suddenly you find something was not configured, and you get into a trap where you say, "Oh, we missed this. This can cause a major incident for us." So, how do you look at that angle for while having the systems enabled?
And this has happened. So what you have just
That's
brought about,
happening.
Prem, this has
Yes, yes,
happened,
yes.
right? And sometimes, so the irony of AI and ML and any machine thing is, right, like it works on certain principles, and if there is any deviation on the principle, it doesn't work, right? While human being can catch it instantly, the systems cannot. So I would say for me, the biggest learning was something which is very intuitive to human is not intuitive to AI ML, right? It's not intuitive to machine. Now, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's about passing on the same complex algorithms that human has to AI, but intuition is very difficult to do, right? And
I think when you
just
said
by looking,
is a pointer, I just wanted to add something here is uh, that's the difference. I think we should always think in when I say a system and a person, right?
yes,
So
yes,
system will work as per what you have defined it, but our
exactly,
intentions, our things, our way of looking at things is very very different when compared to machines. And
yes,
in this discussion or in the earlier discussions, what I've told or what we have discussed is that we should not forget that we are building systems for humans rather than
yes,
systems building our systems, right? So
yes,
that's one challenge what we see when people talk about AI is eating out jobs, AI is eating out.
exactly.
So it is not. I
It is
reiterate
not.
on as many as platforms that I have been where I say AI is an enabler which is going to bring certain flexibility for you to think beyond rather than looking at doing mundane jobs. So that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to tell while that question I leave it to
No,
you.
exactly. I think you are point spot on that, because, and this was a big realization for me. It's so intuitive for me, as you know, as even the web analyst, right? So intuitive, but then the model was not able to do, right? And it was like a moment where saying, you know what, this doesn't work. This means that human intelligence needs to be there, right? And what do we do? How do we integrate these? So both the AIML and the human. So that's why we have both, right? And I'll give you an example, a very layman kind of, again, way back 20, 30 years back, everybody used to calculate. Calculator came, started doing the things. And then human moved to next stage of, enhanced work, right? Like Excel does a lot of things which, look at it like this, right? So AIML can do a lot of repetitive, we won't call it automation because, there's intelligence also to a certain extent, but then it can't do the intuition bit of it, right? It's very very critical, right? And for me, I think that was an aha moment. Okay, what are we trying to do? I thought threat is all about, the patterns, the models, you put, multiple stuff together, and boom, it will give you all the things. No, it will not, right? So I think human aspect is very very critical, very very critical when it comes to identifying the threats, right? Yeah.
So looking at that pointers, how do we look at an advice to the mid-level and the leaders who fear over resilient or over reliance on AI to make their teams complacent or disengaged, right? So when sometimes what we see is we bring so much of automation that people feel, oh, I'm not required. So they get disengaged, right? Sometimes we see people are not given an option where they have ideas. They cannot do implementation. How do you look at this, man? Or what is your advice to those kind of set people? So
So I
who
think
engage, who
I,
don't engage, who get an opportunity but feel that it will be overtaken by them, right?
So I'll give you a very recent example. We did a small hackathon, on this AI piece, and we said, we want to do. We got like 40 people to brainstorm, to ideation, and come back to a feasible solution. Now, while when we initially started with the ideation, it was 40 people, but when it came down to POC, it was 5, 6 people, and then reduced to 3 people when it came into execution, right? Now, the people do feel left out, right? But at the same time, I think it's very important to for leaders, right, to recognize that when you are brainstorming, when you're experimenting, you need many minds together, right? So the power of multiple minds working together, building on idea on top of another, is very much needed. And that's where it's very important to have human, right? So human intelligence, you just can't take away like that, right? um, what can be done through AI and ML is the repetitive stuff, and what we know. So what AI ML can do is what we know, right? And what human beings can also do is what I don't know, what I know I don't know, and what I don't know I don't know, right? In the gamut of whole information, right? And I think this is where the leaders need to be open about it. So if you remember the empathetic part and all, human brings in that perspective, right? So yes, you can free up a lot of resources on doing things which we know, right? And then we need to, I think that all the leaders, and I tell it to my team as well, move on, what you know, that you can actually have machines and system, design machine and systems to do. Then what do? Use that, same human effort now to do things which we don't know. We know that we don't know. And there's a whole lot of gamut of things where, so I think it's very important to identify that, saying that yes, AI is here, is an enabler, can do things more faster. 10 years back you wouldn't even think about terabytes and petabytes of data, but today you are talking, human cannot handle, right? I think it's a machine, so let machine handle what they can do best, let human handle what human can do best,
Exactly.
right? And both need to be in sync. And I think this is the message that all of us as leaders need to percolate, not just with the line managers or the middle managers, but even the team members, right? Because this unrest is there with all the team members as well. They think that, okay, now I have put my thought process and I have put it in a system. Now, what am I going to do, right? Look differently. So you know what you know and you put it in system. Now you go search for something which you don't know. And there's so many things, right? And I think that is where the leaders need to play the coaching role, the openness to things that is there around, trigger the thought process in people or in the team members to go and research a lot, right? Find out things which they can solve. There's tons of thing on this earth, right? Especially on the cyber security to solve. So that is what is going to make things better for us, right? And it's not
And
going to really take
what
it
you
out.
also told is there are tons of things that are there in cybersecurity. Now we are looking at focused areas with AI. Now IAM
Yes.
is one thing, ransom is one thing, right?
Yes.
You look at threat intelligence, then it is looking at monitoring, then it is incident management, then you
Yes.
have problem solving, right? Then building a database to enable the LLM to pick up cues that are already been there, right?
Exactly.
These are things that is going to. Can we talk about a specific case where AI driven threat intelligence transform day to day operation? Because we are not looking at AI threat intelligence at one period, it should work and it should not work for the rest of the day, right? How is it making life easier for these workforce people who look at the operations on a daily basis?
Okay. So I'll give you a small example, right? In if you take like EDR, MDR, or managed service space, take a a CM operator or incident response. He or she is looking at the huge screen and human context. So look at, like, you get alert and warnings, right? If you have a small AI piece which can just summarize and say that you've got so many warnings or maybe so many alerts, and I think these are important for you to deal with it right now, and these probably can wait for another 1 hour. Just that very fact that prioritization is taken by AI system helps the operator, or helps the person who is monitoring do his work much faster. Because if you take, like, the person who is sitting, he's looking at 10 to 15 warnings, he's going line by line, he or she is going line by line, right? And that takes time, right? 10 lines, maybe 10 seconds per 100 seconds, right? And the AI gives it in within 10 seconds. So the efficiency in terms of how the person can prioritize and what's the impact, all those things. I'm giving you a very simple example, but there's like a lot more that can be done, right? And a lot more use cases where a small help, right, can reduce the work that the monitoring and the reporting person is doing from 10 minutes to say 1 minute, 2 minutes, right? um, so yes, there's a whole lot of possibility, not just from the threat intelligence, from the monitoring, from the CM perspective, from the incident response. So that's why I said, one of the metrics is also time to respond and time to recover, because all these things adds up, right? All these things adds up.
Now, looking at the next pointer that I want to understand from you is One trend that cybersecurity leadership should see now that will likely disrupt the IT itself. Not only IT, how do we look at? We've been talking too much of AI on leadership driven things on IT only, right? But industries across the board in the next 2 years. Any insights on that one?
So if you look at like CISO, the whole CISO, role was not that much given importance, maybe even 3 years back. Now, to be, yes, security is important. You put firewalls, you put VPN, you put, and you're taken care of, right? You have authentication and authorization, you're good. Typically, systems IT would just look at some of these things and say, my organization is good in security, right? Today, that's just the base of the pyramid, right? On top of it, you have things coming on from different places. So a role of a CISO becomes very important. So, and the reason why is it because the IT is the one thing which runs the entire organization. Even a single leak anywhere could disrupt the functioning of entire organization, right? So you look at it, how CISO role came into being. The way I look at it, in 2 to 3 years, CISOs will have a place at the board, right? They would be part of the executive leadership. I think in some companies they already are, but not all. Right? But I think it will become an imperative thing because the investments in IT is humongous. For any organization, there's huge cost, right? Now, any data security, any ransom will cause a lot of damage, right? How do you make sure the organization as a is very proactive in doing things? So CISO role is going to become very critical moving forward. And IT and CISO, probably I would look at it, they at some point would merge, right? So CIO that you call, right, Chief Information Officer, and CISO would kind of like merge, and they'll be security would be embedded in everything that you do, right? So it will become, I would say, like, in many organizations it's become an imperative that security has to be there everywhere. But then I think, just taking one thing, so I'll give you, like, server OS, you want to go from one, that will require a CISO to have a, you know tick mark, right? Are you okay with this? Are you seeing anything, right? So small things like this, patch management, right? Hot fix, everything will go through security uh, checks, right? And um, and that is going to become more and more stringent. I'm seeing that myself in my organization. We have more security checks and balances than maybe 2 years back, and that's going to increase. So it will be very tightly integrated moving
Now,
forward,
now
definitely.
coming to what you are saying is now security was always considered as a cost center, right? So it used to be a
Yes.
cost for the organization, and everybody was what the security team is doing. So, but
Yes.
when actual incident happened, it's the security team who jumps in into look at thing how
Right.
it has to look at, and what are the
Exactly.
compliance requirements that are there to be done is what the security team normally looks at, and that is often. No, I think what you also said was it is very clear that the CISOs and CIOs are getting into the crux of finding it how we can secure systems much better, and cybersecurity is given very important because we cannot run away from cybersecurity where we earlier used to call network security. That is not going to be there anymore,
Exactly.
right? So
Exactly.
we have to move
Exactly.
forward where we have converted a security to a network security where we had IDS and IPSs. Then now it is not like that. It is a structure that is built and it is all automatically configured, right? So you you earlier have to sit and write. Now there are workflows, there are templates that are available to
Yes.
configure
Yes.
certain things, right? So it
So
becomes very important.
yeah. So Prem, I'll give you a thing. We talk about OSI layer, right?
Yes,
Earlier, security was tapped at network layer
yes.
three. Today, it is still application level, right? And even beyond that, for that matter, right? So you're looking at each and every layer, and so that's why CIO and CISO are like getting very tightly integrated.
very important points there, madam. So, looking at this one, what are how do we help the team stay again human centric and empathetic when they are working along with algorithms? Like, see, algorithms give you different steps that you should look at, and machine learning models all day give you certain predictions, right? So how do you look at what could be the way that you can help those teams to adapt to these algorithms and mll models?
Right. So I think I would look at the way a little bit differently. The team, the people are the brain, right? They're the ones who design and come up with algorithms,
Yeah.
right? And then have ML models conform to those. Uh, so I would say, my the way I do it is like people, right? So each and every human being has got talent, right? So they come up with those algorithms, right? So for me, it's like you are the brain, you are the person who is innovating, you are the one who is like really creating that ideas. The machine is not about creating idea. You are the one who is creating idea. You are the one who is coming up with the problem solving steps, right? You are the one who is providing the contextual knowledge to take a data, but then putting the context is human, right? And these can't be done by machine. This can't be done by. So I think that's where and I ask my leaders and my team to make sure that they look at what is that they are bringing onto the table, right? Because it's very important for them to feel that, yeah, I'm contributing, right? So I'm contributing, and how am I contributing? Whatever I'm doing is making an impact, right? And that's is the human intelligence, right? So they bring up with new ideas, the new problem solving, the new algorithms, right? And I ask them, go collaborate and brainstorm, get those things, because then you can make the models much more efficient, right? Models are not going to make themselves efficient just like that, right? Yes, they train on data, learn from data, and they can do better, but then the disruptive learning is going to come from human being, and that's not going to stop, right? And this is something that I think we all should this is what human intelligence has led to where we are today, right? you know Look at the, I mean, thousands and thousands of things like maps, everything now you need, it's available on the web. When we were kids, we didn't have that. So human race has gone through so much of growth, and if we don't use the human intelligence to go for the next growth,
Mm,
I don't know who else will do that, right? So I think it's all about human intelligence, how to apply, and things are going to become more complex.
yeah. Now that there was something which we used to talk while as part of a large organization in the last 5 years back, where we used to talk about technology. I used to talk in Tamil, madam. In that case,
Okay.
we used to tell in Tamil saying that technology அவ்வளோ கஷ்டம்லாம் இல்லை. So it is we are making it complex. நீங்க ஒரு ஃபயர் வால் எடுத்துட்டு வந்தீங்க, அதோ ஒரு ரோட் பண்றதுக்கு யூ ஆர் பிரிங்கிங் another router. So
Correct.
after that you are bringing one L2 switch, L3 switch. All this is a layers that you want to make. But if I want to talk to you, I am talking to you directly. That's not as simple as what we are having, right? The complexity
Exactly.
we are building to save so much of data, that is very, very important for us to look
Right.
at. Now, if you go back again and change one leadership decision that related to AI implementation in specific to threat intelligence, is there anything that you can think of, or you have anything in mind?
I have something in mind, and I don't know whether I'll be successful in it or not.
Okay.
But right now, we are doing so. We've got like multiple models, and um, it is a level of efficacy. And I just mentioned, right, like there was a very human intuitive thing with how do we get so I'm looking at like how do we change that thing, something which is very intuitive, and probably that intuition over a period of time and multiple instances becomes a known knowledge, right? So to me, if I have to change something, I would look at like, is there any process through which we can fasten this entire thing, right? Because then human can go and do much more higher things, right? So I think that is one thing that I would see to how can I change, and but then I think it will take some time. It will definitely take. It's not easy. I think, as I
So
say, sounds.
it is very easy to get into. There was somebody who were talking last week in our sessions. We cannot solve a problem the way we created it. So it is not easy
Yes.
to solve a problem the way we started looking at when we found that this could be one of the solutions. There should be a different way we should look at
Mindset.
looking at that problem. Now, coming to that point, how do these freshers think or junior professionals can develop AI literacy without losing sight on fundamental cybersecurity principles?
Right. So one of the things I would say, and that's what I do with my folks who come join us as a fresher, is one is the domain knowledge, right? What is cybersecurity all about, right? And then there are self-led course on AI. So since cybersecurity you really can't do without AI, I think it's imperative for the freshers also to know. So we run a program where we have like a set of series of training material on AI, but then the domain expertise we do it through sessions, right? So and we say it both go hand in hand. It's not that you know about the domain, you know about your languages, all that will be taken care. You do need to know about. And actually, you brought out a very good point. Freshers want to learn AI more because AI is the in thing today, right? And then so the messaging that I have done is in my teams are AI is there to do a job, but what is that job? You really need to know what is that job, and that's the domain part of it, right? So you need to understand the domain. So until unless you know the use cases for what you're going to do AI, how are you
I,
going to marry
you
both of them
brought one
together?
important point here, madam. I think people are, we as people at least were curious in asking questions. Now the generation don't want to look at questions asked and clarifying. They'll search somewhere, 100 things they'll search. They'll not get the right answer. They'll think whatever that is given, that is the answer. They get into,
The
and
truth.
looking at AI also, if you look at uh, Google search, when we started Google search, it used to do a lot of data mining, right? So when we searched, we had
Yes.
hundreds of links coming in different options. Now that generation is gone. We are in the generation of ChatGPT, where you get only specific answers, right? And and the point that we want to bring also is that every person who looks at ChatGPT is getting a specific answer, right? And that answer is either a small script, a step-by-step process, or this is the stuff that you should look at this specific pointer. Now every data is
Yeah.
already there. The OEMs have fed their data on the internet where it says
Yes.
this is what it is there and stuff like that. Now, asking right questions is the requirement which is becoming more important rather than saying, I don't know, how do I
Yeah.
adopt AI? No,
And that's where the human part comes in very, very important, right? Because you can have
mm,
tons of things, but then you need to ask the right question and at the right moment, right? Because you're probably getting a lot of feeds. But how do you ask those right questions to get the answers that you're looking for? It's very, very important. Very important. You're right on that one. And freshers are very inquisitive. So the good part with the freshers is they're eager to learn. They go search a lot of things, but then they also are listening to us, right? They're also listening to us in terms of what are the cues we are sending them. So they see, okay, I see these things from chat. So the one thing with ChatGPT is also because you're loaded with that, right? Now, the moment you twist certain things,
yes,
there's a
yes,
different thing coming, right? And that's where, and that's where you know, I tell freshers, this is your game to play, right? Like you go figure out what are the things that is happening, put a little bit of a tweak,
yes,
and there are different stuff coming, right? So that's your area to really go see, understand, make out things, ask the right questions, right? As you mentioned. So it's a very easy and a tricky thing. People, oh, I've, so if you see resumes also that is coming, right? Oh, I'm done AI. Now you think what a fresher would have done in AI so fast, right? But then, yeah, that's how things are going. But I think it's important to know what are the use case you're
yeah.
solving for. Does it really need to be AI? Does it not need to? Threat intelligence, definitely. But not everything needs AI, right? Not everything needs AI. And I think that is the thing that we need to educate the freshers with,
Ma'am, can
right?
you describe a moment where you're able to hear me, madam? Yeah. Can you describe a moment
Yes,
where
yes. I
an
think it went off
unexpected
for some time.
AI generated insight completely shifted the leadership strategy or the approach?
Um, I would say no. So AI is very, very costly if you want to
Yeah.
implement it. Okay, um, huge infrastructure cost, huge GPUs, right? Um, so while everybody wants to run the wagon with AI and all, very soon you realize it's not so easy. And ROI, getting ROI is not the same as the rest of the uh, businesses. Okay, so this is a big shift, I would say, on the AI side. The investment vis-a-vis return is a very different cycle with AI than with any other product. So I think making sure that you remember I was talking about commitment from
Yeah.
leadership really requires commitment in terms of infrastructure, in terms
Fine.
of the money budget, in terms of resilience, because this doesn't give you
Yes.
immediate results,
With you on that.
right? It doesn't give you immediate. So I think from a leadership strategy perspective, that change in mindset, right? Saying that, okay, oh, I'm going to put in so much and I'm not going to see anything for next 2 3 months or maybe 6 months. That shift
Hmm.
I've seen, right? And I think as I speak, that's a shift that we all are trying to inculcate, because yes, you want to do great things, but look at like whatever Google did or whatever they put in a lot of money to get to where it is. So if you want to do for a smaller thing also, right, threat intelligence, it's going to take time, right? It's not something which will happen just like that, right? So the investment vis-a-vis ROI, I think, is very, very different in AI enabled systems, I would say.
Now, with the final question that I have for the day, and we are on top of the hour, right? So, uh, I will summarize once I've asked this question, what we discussed in
Hmm.
this one. Finally, for leaders aiming to align AI driven threat intelligence with ethical practices, empathy, what is one guiding principle you would like to bring it on to, or make it as kind of a command saying that this is I swear by, right? Kind of.
You know what? I think, see, all this we are doing is for humans. So I would say one guiding thing that I would say is, while we are doing AI and you're doing, and there's a lot of talk about fakes and deep fakes and all that. I would say human dignity, right? Human dignity and trust would be, I would, one single thing that I would swear when it comes to uh, AI, right? Because you can do magic, uh, or you can do really do in a different direction. So I would, one thing, human dignity and the trust factor,
Yeah.
right?
Ma'am, I would, with this, I have my pointers that I wanted your inputs. I've, this one. I am just going to give you a summary on some pointers that I've been taking on with this.
Sure.
We started with the organization integrating threat intelligence and systems, and what are the mistakes that we could look at is one thing we started with the session, and then we went to real time instances where threats were detected faster than humans by the systems is what we spoke about, and some of the reactions that leaders have brought in when they found systems are taking faster decisions and giving their surprises is what we spoke about. And then we spoke about a balance between intelligence, threat intelligence, and the human intuition, which I think is very, very important for us to look at. Then we spoke about
Yes.
empathy, emotional intelligence, leading cybersecurity teams is what we spoke about. Then we spoke about some of the
Yes.
leadership qualities that will evolve over the period, where you look at non-negotiable cybersecurity led AI era, where you think crisis is one thing which has to be avoided with AI and see how we can enhance. Then some personal lessons that we
Yes.
spoke about. We spoke about trust and caution between real-time systems, decision making, and affecting security, which can take a hit. Then we spoke about AI driven threat intelligence transforming operations and making easy things for workforce is what we spoke about. And some of the disruptions that can be brought not only to IT but also across industries in the next 2 years is what we spoke about. We spoke about alongside with machine learning and algorithms we spoke, and that's where we spoke on few pointers. And we spoke about fundamental cybersecurity when we talk about literacy of AI itself, right? That is should not be overtaken. And what would be some of the uh, ROIs or pointers that leaders would not look immediately is also one pointer which we should, because that needs a lot of buy-in from the organization. And how we can protect or assume can have a fix or a knowledge base that can be built where the intelligence frameworks pick up easily and come out with solutions where we can take our time and effort minimized, and that's what we spoke about. Finally, we spoke about freshers, mid-level managers, how they can be part of it, and how mid-level managers enable or bringing the systems is what we spoke about. Then we spoke on the last part is that AI driven threat intelligence where ethical practices and empathy are not compromised and we swear by it. See, this is what we spoke overall
Yes.
on the 1 hour 10 minute session. I think 1 hour 3 minute session is what we have overshooten by 3 4 minutes now, because the topic was so huge and madam has been giving a lot of insights on getting these things to, and with this I would like to thank you for joining us today, and it's been amazing having you on the session. And we have streamed this podcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We hope this discussion was valuable to the listeners. Thank you for joining who have joined our channels on CloudSec. We have the streamed across two channels, which is Cloud Security Alliance Bangalore and the Power of Knowing Forum, which is a podcast forum which we are running these podcasts. Do look at following us, subscribing us, and we have our next session scheduled tomorrow at 2, that is a 227th episode, where we are talking about celestial why prosperity demands women and men as co-stewards to bring a thought around it. And that is going to happen at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow. Looking forward to see you again. Good day and bye. And any last words that you want to have, your pointers, ma'am, before we conclude?
First of all, thanks, Prem, for inviting me and having me share my perspective. I think it's a great place to be here now in this time where AI is changing the entire domain. Uh, we are here to make an impact, and I think AI will help us make that
Definitely.
impact. So I think
AI,
it's you, us, and
yeah, it
AI
is
together.
going to be more automation in terms of creating or not working on things at least priority, where we look at operational kind of work where that is a day-to-day task and you don't need to have a person to do it. It can be done by a machine, right? So that is where AI is moving on. I think I'll add one point here, madam, is when we look at AI, the manufacturing industry or the automobile industry has already automated most of the things. If you really look at,
Oh yeah.
nobody does welding or fixing the channel, and
Oh yes.
even the tablet packing is not this one. They only look at quality check whether
Yes.
the measure things are put on. Is there a process deviation? Because AI is there. Now we are coming back to ourselves. We are looking at AI for ourselves, that is IT, and we are like seeing how IT
Yes.
systems can be audited with AI and AI
Oh
itself
yes.
getting audited. So that's the stage we are going to. So with that, I would like to conclude the session, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you here, madam. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.